through this real quick to show you, but you know, so.
And you can.
Okay.
Like, it doesn't have to be the full on. It can be, you know.
I mean, I don't have to be anywhere until 2, so I'm sure you've got other things to do also. Okay, so what I'm talking about is what we know today about climate change, why it's urgent, and how we can address it with renewable energy. And the first thing I like to point out to people is that Al Gore did not invent global warming. And this is a video that's available on the internet. And what this is a TV show from 1958, so over 50 years ago. And it's the Bell Telephone Science Show. And they had a segment on global warming. You might recognize the producer of this film.
Extremely dangerous questions. Because with our present knowledge, we have no idea what would happen. Even now, man may be unwittingly changing the world's climate through the waste products of his civilization. Due to our release in factories and automobiles every year of more than 6 billion tons of carbon dioxide, which helps air absorb heat from the sun, our atmosphere seems to be getting warmer. This is bad. Well, it's been calculated a few degrees rise in the Earth's temperature would melt the polar ice cap. And if this happened, an inland sea would fill a good portion of the Mississippi Valley. Tourists and glass-bottom boats would be viewing the drowned towers of Miami through 150 feet of tropical water. For in weather, we're not only dealing with forces of a far greater variety than even the atomic physicist encounters, but with life itself.
Well, to get water that deep, you'd have to melt the whole East Antarctic ice sheet, and no one is predicting that over the next 100 years. But I'll talk later about what scientists think is the most likely sea level rise by 2100. But certainly Greenland and the West Antarctic ice sheet are losing ice rapidly. The greenhouse effect is a little bit different than what was described there. In the greenhouse effect, it isn't so much causing the atmosphere to absorb more sunlight. What it does is it traps the outgoing radiation. The Earth is trying to be in radiation balance so that the sunlight coming in is equal to the long wave or infrared radiation going out. And greenhouse gases, the ones that are there naturally as well as the ones that we're adding, trap that outgoing infrared radiation, and the only way the Earth can get into equilibrium is to heat up. You often hear the skeptics say that, look, the amount of greenhouse gases we're adding is small compared to what's up there, and that's true. But what's up there already has an enormous effect. The average temperature of the Earth without those greenhouse gases would be about 0 degrees Fahrenheit. All the oceans would be frozen if it wasn't for those greenhouse gases that are naturally up there. So what they do is they raise the temperature of the Earth about 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's true we've only added a little bit to that. But that little bit we've added has already raised the temperature of the Earth about 1.3 degrees Fahrenheit, and might raise the Earth's temperature another 5 or 6 degrees Fahrenheit by 2100, which is an enormous temperature rise. If you go into a typical bookstore and you look for books on global warming, you will see books like this, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Global Warming and Other Eco-Myths. And what we're really seeing, I think, is this campaign to spread doubt. And this is a quote, "Doubt is our product since this is the best means of competing with the body of fact," and the quotes there are theirs, "that exists in the mind of the general public. It is also the means of establishing a controversy." And this is really from a Brown and Williamson Tobacco Corporation report back in 1969. But some of the same folks that were involved in that campaign are involved in the global warming campaign today. A Gallup poll this year, has shown similar results, that basically whether people think global warming is exaggerated is correlated not so much to how much science they know, but rather to what political party they're a member of, whether they're Republicans, Independents, or Democrats. We see in the Republican Party a very large amount of doubt of what we know about climate change. The Democrats seem to agree much more with what the climate scientists are telling us. The independents are somewhere in between. And this gap is growing, and in fact, the amount of uncertainty is growing among all groups. I mentioned those different books about climate change and how it's a hoax. One book in particular struck me, and that's this one by Christopher Horner, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Global Warming. He came into Denver and he debated one of our climate scientists, and so I took the time to read his book thoroughly. And it has a lot of references in the back, but if you dig into those references, you will find many, many references that either don't say what he says in the main text or are simply misinterpreted. So I just picked one out here, and on page 66 he says, for every shrinking glacier there's a growing one, but the growing ones get much less attention. Well, the trouble with a statement like that is there are people that actually keep records on this, and the World Glacier Monitoring Service has records on advancing and retreating glaciers that go back to the 1800s. But if you look at the lowermost graph here, the red ones are the retreating glaciers, the number of retreating glaciers, and the blue bar represents the advancing glaciers, and all the way at the right end we have 2005 here. So you can clearly see that in 2005, over 90% of the glaciers were retreating, not advancing. In fact, of the 442 glaciers that were studied, 26 were advancing, 18 were stationary, 398 were retreating, and of the ones that were advancing, many of those were thinning faster than they were advancing. So they're actually experiencing a net loss of ice mass even though they're advancing. It's really the mass of ice that matters. And you know, we've seen the temperature goes up and down because it's influenced by a number of things, and I'll cover that later. But if you look at world glacier mass, these two curves represent similar things. The top curve is 30 reference glaciers, and the bottom one is all the glaciers. And you can see that we've lost roughly 14 meters, or basically over 45 feet of thickness since 1980, average thickness of these glaciers. So that's a lot of ice mass. But not only is the ice mass, we continue to lose ice mass, but you can see this curve is concave downward. In other words, it's accelerating. It's getting steeper as we go along in time. This appeared on Fox News. Do emails reveal scientists' claims on climate change are bunk? It says here, hackers break into servers and purportedly uncover emails urging scientists to hide the decline of temperatures, manipulate data, and silence skeptics. So there's a lot of news coverage of this so-called climate gate. Well, the British government has commissioned several different studies to investigate this. And you can see this one study by the British Parliament Science and Technology Committee concluded that the focus on Professor Jones and the Climatic Research Unit has been largely misplaced on the much-cited phrases in the leaked emails trick and hiding the decline. The committee considers that they were colloquial terms used in private emails, and the balance of evidence is that they were not part of any systematic attempt to mislead. In fact, they conclude here, global warming is happening and it's induced by human activity. Another recent report that came out, this was on April 14th, Lord Roxburgh's Science Assessment Panel concluded we saw no evidence of any deliberate scientific malpractice in any of the work of the Climatic Research Unit. And had it been there, we believe it's likely we would have detected it. Rather, we found a small group of dedicated, if slightly disorganized researchers who were ill-prepared for being the focus of public attention. So this certainly does not depict a group of scientists scheming to fool the world, which the skeptics would have you believe. Now, the Lord Roxburgh study got quite a bit of coverage in the mainstream press, but I was curious because Fox News had so much about ClimateGate, how they would cover the Lord Roxburgh study. So I Googled it, and I also went through to the Fox News site, and I just searched for Roxburgh and found that your search for Roxburgh did not return any results. So Fox News apparently did not consider it newsworthy to cover the results of that British panel. There's been a lot of talk about disappearing glaciers by 2030. We talked about that before, that in fact that was one statement on one page in a 1,000-page document, and that 1,000-page document is one of 3 volumes, each 1,000 pages. So they said that glaciers in the Himalayas could be gone by 2030.